Each year, as we begin the season of Lent, we are invited to take up the challenge as presented to us in chapter 6 of St. Matthew's Gospel. When you give alms, do it without show. When you fast, do it without ostentation. When you pray, do it without drawing attention to yourself. Do all to give glory to the Father. And each year as I take up this challenge of the Gospel, I'll try to draw up a few resolutions for myself to make it a bit more practical. This year I have framed my resolutions in a little different way. I describe them as twofold: to live more intentionally and to recover some lost treasures. To live more intentionally, what might this mean? I suggest we could take our cue from the great philosopher Plato when he said, "The unexamined, the unreflective life is not worth living." And that's what it means, I think, to live more intentionally. I think we would admit that we can spend a lot of time before the screen. The screen can kind of dominate. The screen of the TV, the screen of our laptop, the screen of our smartphone. And we tend to be rather passive before the screen. And that would be particularly true of the TV screen. Having watched a program that we enjoy, we then take the remote control and maybe we flick through the channels looking for something else, but really we are kind of wasting time in a sort of a useless exercise. Maybe with the iPad and the smartphone we are a bit more active because we are doing something, but still we can, after we've done that, we continue scrolling through the screen looking for something else, and it can be a rather waste of time. Living intentionally enables me to be more active, to be more creative. I can take up a good book. I could join a book club. I could become engaged with painting, with some other craft. I could maybe learn to play bridge. I could be involved with social clubs. Just last week I was speaking to a friend of mine, a retired teacher, and she told me that she has begun classes on the mandolin, living intentionally. I think we can also live intentionally in terms of nature. Maybe walking, cycling, gardening. It is good for body and spirit to be out with nature and to appreciate the wonderful gifts that God has given us in His creation, living intentionally. And recently I came across these words of wisdom from the Eastern tradition, which says, "Plant your garden, decorate your soul, instead of waiting for someone to bring you flowers." I think it's a fine word. Plant your garden, decorate your soul, instead of waiting for someone to bring you flowers. The season of Lent is also a grace-filled opportunity to recover some lost treasures, people and things and places that I have neglected. I can reconnect with school friends, friends from college days, friends, maybe work colleagues. can reconnect with them, maybe go for a cup of coffee, have a meal, enjoy some time together. And perhaps it is when we read or hear of the death of a former schoolmate that we tend to look again at these precious memories, precious times from the past, that life is indeed precious. A treasure to be recovered could also be in terms of place. The place where I grew up, maybe the place where I lived my early years until work or ministry brought me to another place. Or the place could be in terms of somewhere I visited on a holiday that was particularly meaningful. And I can now revisit those places in my reflection, in my prayer, and be grateful for them. Treasures recovered. A treasure can also be in terms of a spiritual experience. And I have kept a journal for many years now. And in 2016, I think quite a portion of my journal for that year would have been connected with a 3-month sabbatical I spent in the Holy Land. I had been there 4 years previously with parishioners from our parish in the Philippines, and that heightened my desire to return there someday. So in 2016, I was with a group of 30 people, men and women from different missionary congregations. Our base was Jerusalem, where we had classes in Scripture, in the Oriental churches, in other things. And then, of course, it was during the period of Holy Week where we followed the way of Jesus. And then we spent a week in Galilee. And a highlight of that week was climbing Mount Tabor. We began our climb at 7 a.m. in the morning, all together, but in silence. But when a short time, that togetherness spread out and became a single file as people moved up the mountain at their own unhurried pace. I remember it took me about 40 minutes. And I felt on that walk up the mountain, up the winding path, I felt a great appreciation for my family and my close friends. And I brought them to prayer. I was truly grateful for that experience. At the top, when we reached the top, we celebrated the Eucharist together. And I recall the words of that German writer, Eckhart Tolle, where he says, "Gratitude is an essential part of being present. When you go deeply into the present, gratitude arises spontaneously." And I can still hear the echo of the words of Peter when he said, "Lord, it is wonderful for us to be here." So I ask you, what treasures can you recover this Lent? What blessings in your life? How can you live a little bit more intentionally during these 40 days? We began with a couple of verses from chapter 6 of Matthew, and let me conclude with 2 more verses from the same chapter. "Store up treasure for yourselves in heaven, where neither moth nor woodworm destroy them, and thieves cannot break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also."